Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session three of the series of Fireside Chats. My name is Mandy Mock, and I am the founder and CEO of Applied AG. Applied AG is the new kid on the block as an international higher education service provider, and we specialize in evaluation, branding, and professional networking solutions. I started Apply AG in January this year after working for QS for 17 years, and I'm now very excited to have embarked on this new journey. While there have been some challenges, not least due to COVID-19, I think this has forced all of us to learn to innovate and become more creative. I am sure better and greater things lie ahead. Today's fireside chat, Inclusiveness on Campus, Policy and Good Practices, is led by Mrs. Rudy Ely, partner at Education Insights UK and a veteran higher education leader with leadership experience in Asia, Europe, Australia, and Africa. She will be guiding today's discussion with four outstanding speakers from different parts of the world, whom she will shortly introduce to all of you. Please allow me to also thank Indonesia's Universitas Hasanuddin for being the main sponsor of this series of Applied AG Fireside Chats. Universitas Hasanuddin is a leading research-driven comprehensive university located in Makassar, South Sulawesi Province, Indonesia. Both Universitas Hasanuddin and the island of Sulawesi are true undiscovered gems, and UNHAS, as they are also known, is keen to explore further collaboration with international partners. I would also like to thank Education Insights as our co-hosting partner and our amazing panelists who have agreed to join us for what promises to be a very exciting and insightful fireside chat. Now, without further ado, allow me to hand over to the very capable and always charming Mrs. Rini Ely.
Thanks, Mandy. Hello and welcome to Apply History Fireside Chat. For delegates who joined us in the last couple of months, welcome back. For delegates who joined us for the first time, a warm welcome. The Apply History Fireside Chat is held once a month. It brings to you a global panel of knowledgeable and passionate speakers on topical issues. Today's topic is inclusiveness on campus, policy and good practices. The Apply History Fireside Chat is designed to be cozy, relaxed, engaging, and at the same time, serious, fun, provocative, thought-provoking, and blue sky. Most important of all, we welcome a lively interaction between our speakers and participants. Many of you have posted questions when you registered. We will invite you to ask your questions once all our four panel speakers have addressed the topic within their 3 minutes. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Karen Fisher, senior writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education in the USA. Karen's work focuses on higher education and has appeared in the Chronicle of Higher Education, the New York Times, EdSource, to name just a few. She's a research associate at the Center for Studies in Higher Education at the University of California at Berkeley. Karen, the next 3 minutes is all yours.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be with you here all this morning for me, coming from America. And I'm going to speak, I cover higher education, both in the United States, but also internationally. But I'm going to speak a lot from the American perspective, because as you all might imagine, this has been an enormous issue within the United States in the last couple of months, as we've really seen the deaths of George Floyd and other Black Americans, and the Black Lives Matter protests really spark, just widespread protest here in the US. And it's impossible for those things that are happening in the real world not to come into the ivory tower. And I think it's arguable that it might have happened anyway if you look at who are in universities today, both their diversity, but also their expectations. They really, I think, are wanting and have some hunger for universities to talk about these things. I mean, some polling suggests that if American young people say if their university did not address issues like Black Lives Matter, like inequality and systemic racism, it would really affect, and I think affect in a negative way, how they view their institutions. And so universities really are being called upon to address these issues. And then you say, but what? I mean, COVID, the coronavirus pandemic, has really sort of taken up the oxygen. It's really affected drawn attention, and everybody is kind of right in scrambling mode. All universities are reacting and trying to figure out how to do these things. And I guess what I would suggest, and one of the two things I'm going to propose is, in some weird way, this offers opportunity. And I've seen on campuses, these Black Lives Matter protests happened June and July when most universities, their semesters had already ended. And I think in the normal world, what would have happened was we would not have seen conversations happening. We would not have seen dialogue or town halls on universities happening until they reconvened in August or September. But I think because of COVID, institutions were just already in the mode of being in communication in a remote sense. And so I saw across the country a number of universities across the United States, that is, really sort of step up and assemble these on very short notice, these town halls on Zoom, and like we're doing today, and other social media platforms, to have conversations. And I think often we think about this programming as being something that's got to be designed and really well thought out. But I think one lesson of the summer has been that students just want to be heard, and that's something very important to them. Just in the few last moments that I have, let me suggest something else. As Winnie's introduction suggests, I'm an international reporter, and so a lot of what I focus on is not just what's happening within a country, but it is also about how that country interacts. And I think that there is, particularly in the US, a real a lack, a demand for thinking about what is intercultural, these intercultural conversations, what do they mean when they also involve crossing borders and boundaries? And so for universities, how can they sort of address these issues in a way when they're having students who are coming from all parts of the world where ideas of discrimination, racism, and bias are not the same as they are in the home country? And so how can we make these conversations around diversity and inclusivity even more inclusive? Thanks, Winnie.
So very much, Karen. You have started your 3 minute with a lot of really meaty sort of topics there, and I think it's going to be a very exciting conversation later on. Thank you very much. Professor Pauline Strahan, Professor of Sociology and Dean of Students at the Singapore Management University in Singapore, is going to speak next. Her research interests center around the sociology of family and medical sociology. She advocated work-life balance and the nurture of a more pro-family social environment during her 3-year term as a nominated Member of Parliament. Prof. Pauline, your 3 minutes starts now.
Pauline, you're muted.
Okay, my 3 minutes starts now. It happens to me all the time. Well, in the conversation on building an inclusive campus, I would like to, just highlight 2 tenets, which I think are very important. The first, of course, is the way we conduct admissions, right? An inclusive campus must surely have a space for persons with special needs. An inclusive campus must surely have a space for ethnic minorities, and it must surely have a space for international students. And of course, finally, it should be a space where persons with different viewpoints and different philosophical leanings must feel welcome, right? To come together and share. So I think very important for us, if we want to embrace an inclusive campus, to look at our admissions criteria and to ensure that we don't have biases that privilege certain groups in the name of meritocracy, right? So I think in Singapore, what we have done progressively, I think the DSA, discretionary admissions track, is certainly, a very forward-looking track for ensuring that we have diversity on our grounds. And of course, having a proportion of international students with us every cohort, we guarantee that. So I think most of our universities have between 10 to 20%. And that's very important because it ensures that there is internationalization while we are at home, right? But the other tenet that I want to spend the next next minute on would be what we do once we receive these students. How do we promise them a safe space to express their ideals and to share their aspirations, right? And this then forces us to look at our curriculum. Because if we leave things to just free will, chances are, we may end up with cliques on campus, right? And that's, the integration is not really going to happen. So in terms of curriculum, for example, we should be careful that we promote cultural sensitivities. So many universities would have this in their core curriculum, as SMU does. And of course, that global exposure, compulsory global exposure, as we do at SMU, gives every student a chance to study abroad. Even if it's for a month or just a summer exchange, that on-site experience is going to broaden that young person's mindset tremendously. We should also grow social awareness, because then that promotes and facilitates inclusiveness in their everyday walk. So something like making compulsory community service, right? It allows and alerts students to the fact that there are people who are in different circumstances. There are gaps in our society. It alerts them to inequalities around us. And then because of the community service engagement, it empowers them to think of interventions to see how they can be of help in bridging the gap. And finally, I think it's very important for us to, when the students are with us, we have to promote mutual respect and tolerance for diverse views. I think a lot of what happens in the classroom, right, will either bring out the lioness in the child, or it would mute the more timid ones. So I think universities have a lot of responsibilities, because they come to us, our students come to us at the advent of their adulthood, and they are searching boundaries, right? So if we don't give them a space to grow and to venture beyond the norm, they will always be in a very traditional mindset. But if we give them too much liberty, as in there are no boundaries, then I think the danger is it nurtures the me only, I'm the only one that's important kind of mindset, which is not good, right? For promoting, an integrated community and society. It's my 3 minutes up. I was so dazzled, I didn't time myself.
Perfect timing.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pauline. I think you're going to get quite a lot of questions later on in terms of how to operationalize it, because there is so much there. And I think a lot of people will be sending kids to SMU. Our next speaker is Ms. Louise Gowith. I can't do my French, so you have to correct me later. Staff and Students Engagement Officer at University of the West of England in Bristol, United Kingdom. Louise is an equality specialist in higher education, working to increase engagement for staff and students. Her aspiration is to become a leading CEO in the charity sector, combining her passion for equality, amplifying diverse voices, and creating sustainable social change. Louise, the stage is all yours in the next 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I think my thoughts are very much that I really like the title of Inclusiveness on Campus, and I think inclusiveness on campus, I think one of the things, like even just with equality and diversity, getting it right really benefits everyone, that it isn't just for international students or Black students on campus or students with caring responsibilities. Actually, it really has a whole institutional level impact when universities do the right thing, and not just in terms of a social responsibility or a legal responsibility or even like a human responsibility, but it kind of really goes really deep in terms of the reasons and the purpose of why we should be not just aiming, but like achieving and succeeding in creating inclusive campuses. In my work with equality and diversity, I'm very much about making sure that equality and diversity is everyone's responsibility. And one of the things that we've seen, especially with COVID, has been much more collective hands-on deck approach, rather than this is your issue in terms of a department within an institution, and we'll do our thing. And I think even it's been really great that people have been working together, and even between COVID and Black Lives Matter, people have started to really understand, not within with whatever role you have within an institution, you can't not take on equality, diversity, and inclusion. And I think that's probably one of what all us as equality specialists have been trying to achieve in like different roles and different organizations that we've been in, to really kind of share the load, share the responsibility, and even share the successes when things go right. One of the things I found really interesting is that there's loads of things that because of COVID that and even Black Lives Matter, that normally organizations are very known, institutions are very known that if you want to try and change policies, processes, systems, the journey to get there is sometimes a year, a few years by the time you kind of have the right people around the table. But actually, COVID has really shown us that if we really want change to happen, we can actually achieve it faster than we probably thought in the past. And so it kind of begs us to kind of really think as to whether we were we always thought sometimes barriers to change was always external, but I think sometimes the barriers to change were probably internal within our teams, within even just the mindset. So I think there's some things that you're like, oh, well, this is impossible to change, and actually it can. So I think it's been really great that there's been a catalyst of energy and desire to really kind of to fix the system, really, to be honest, and to fix it at its core, rather than I think so my role works very heavily in terms of engagement and events, and I think engagement or events and all this kind of thing are really critical and important for creating communities. But I think the key bit is the systems and the processes that your institution is working within. So I think for me that's one of the biggest things that I would love institutions to kind of hold on to, that actually change is more accessible than we think it is. But we just got to be willing to kind of probably think a little bit more creatively, and to not just like, I don't know, sometimes we just presume like, oh, it will happen someday, but actually our students on our campuses and our staff as well that work within our institutions, they need the change to be happening now, rather than for it to be part of a strategic plan that's going to take 5 years to materialize. So yeah,
thank you, Louise. I think system and processes, we'll hold on to those keywords later, and yeah. I think again quite a lot of questions will be going in that direction perhaps later on. Mm-hmm. Last but not least, Mr. Aaron Dark, Senior Marketing and Communications Consultant from Australia, who has built and marketed global brands and products for over 15 years. This includes within the Australian higher education sector, as we know is one of the key export sector for Australia, where he has extensive experiences from multiple universities and has developed student-centric content marketing and brand positioning connected to diversity and inclusion for contemporary student audiences. Let's listen to Aaron for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Winnie. Thank you very much, Mandy, as well. You know, I want to say that I really love universities, you know, and I love working in universities. And part of that is because I think universities on the whole have always been actually very safe spaces. You know, I think universities, in comparison to the communities that they're a part of, are diverse and are inclusive. They're not utopias, doesn't mean there's no racism or no sexism or homophobias, but on the whole, they're places where those conversations can happen. You know, I'm myself experienced discrimination growing up. I'm a member of the LGTB community. I know what it's like from a very personal level. And I got through my teenage years in a very small country place because I knew that I could one day go to a university and that it would be a safe space for me and that I would be valued there in a way that I hadn't felt in the broader community. And many years later, working in the international higher education sector, I found that again, you know, and I think particularly that part of a university, you know, international higher education, when it's at its best and when it's at its most contemporary, it's not a business model. It is about social and cultural values. Internationalization is a cultural phenomenon, and that's what really we are about. And that's what I really love about it. However, having said that, here we are in 2020 and COVID has happened. And, you know, I worry because I think we are kidding ourselves if we think that the isolationism that COVID has brought about, it's not just logistical and it's not just a physical phenomena. It has become a cultural phenomena. For some people, that's a new thing. In other ways, it has emboldened or empowered forces that were there all along and that in many ways have been intrinsically a kind of enemy to the internationalization of the higher education sector. I think we all know, you know, we know what I mean there. And so what I worry about at the moment is a lot of the conversations I'm hearing, and I think it's very understandable because a lot of people in the sector are worried about their livelihoods. And we talk a lot about the students that have not been able to come back or that we've lost, or the students that won't be coming. But there are still hundreds of thousands of international students that are still studying right now. And I guess for someone that, you know, my career is around messaging a lot, I think we need to be really important, conscious of the messaging that is going out there at a time when actually communities are having conversations about universities and about internationalization within universities at a volume that we haven't really seen for a very long time because of COVID. And so I agree that there's an opportunity there. Somebody else said that earlier, and I think that's the case, but I think we have to be very careful about what we're putting out there and what the students that are still here are hearing. I think we're framing it, I keep hearing the conversation framed economically, you know, and I think that is understandable because there is an economic reality to that. But I really think universities should be making a bigger effort to really make that cultural argument around internationalization. You know, the international higher education, you know, it is in a crisis moment. It is in danger by many forces at the moment. And I think what we're losing is much more than just money. And often you see these corporate communications or executive communications that go out and get in media and they talk about the money aspect. But I worry about how that comes across to students that are already here, you know, or in universities, hearing, you know, these conversations where they're sort of reduced to money. You know, I think a lot of them hear that. I think that's a shame because it's certainly not indicative of all the amazing people that work, you know, in the trenches and on the ground with international students. So, you know, that's my concern at the moment, is that that's not getting through enough and that argument is not being made to the society enough. I think we need to be going out to people and really letting them know why this matters to us socially and culturally. It's not just because we're losing in export, you know, and in Australia, that is definitely the way the conversation is being framed. So I guess that's what I have to say about it all. You know, I think universities are great places and we do great things and we need to let people know that.
Thanks, Aaron. I think you have quite a lot of questions on the how later on, so I'll be prepared. So before we open the interaction between panelists and participants, I would like to suggest that we actually open the floor between our panelists first, because from the US and current international experience, obviously Singapore welcome a lot of international students, and some of the things that Prof. Pauline just mentioned in terms of the diverse group, and also Louise's experience as a specialist in equality. And obviously Aaron brings in, you know, the aspect that you just mentioned in terms of really speak to the heart of what universities could do as a safe space for conversations, which Karen also sort of alluded to earlier on. So perhaps it's for the panel members to have any observations, comments that they want to ask their fellow speakers before we open the floor to all the participants who have signed in so far. Do you want to pose a question to each other? I do have a question for Karen, if I may kick off. Is it okay, Karen? My question actually goes to, I think I agree with you, the conversation and the timely conversation because of what happened at the moment in terms of a lot of the movements, the pandemic, etc. In terms of the intercultural dialogue and conversations, I might be asking a very naive question. Obviously, the US sector is extremely big as well. Where do you think that sort of where do you think we actually need to start? Because obviously you have the geographical sort of differences between universities across the country. But where do you think is a good starting point for that conversation? And where would you like to see it go?
I mean, I think colleges really have to meet, universities have to meet students where they are and listen to their concerns. I mean, I think a lot of this is really going to be driven by today's students and who are, I think, very attuned to these issues. They feel them very deeply. And so, you know, in some ways, you know, I think having all this intentional programming is going to be very important in the long term. But I think just having that space, I mean, Erin got at this, having a space where people can talk and feel like they are heard, I think is going to be more important. And I think it's also going to drive then action. I mean, you can already see across the US renamings of buildings and taking down of statues. And really then I think some of this will get into things like, you know, that Pauline said, which are thinking about the curriculum and thinking about the things that are at the core actually of what universities do and how we, you know, how the university sector can be inclusive and it's more inclusive in its admission. And in terms of ensuring student success too, because I think, and perhaps this is something we can talk about later, we know that more diverse students struggle to succeed in university. And so it's one thing for higher ed to have these broad conversations about what's going on in society, but I think they'll also be challenged to look at how they act and how they serve these students.
Erin, just back to the all the speakers. Do you have any observations, question, or query for other fellow speakers?
Well, if I may just jump in here, you know, the concern always with, as a sociologist, right, when there are issues that polarize the conversations, right, it becomes very difficult because on one hand, you want students, especially since they're young adults, and you know the biomarkers are just developing and they're shifting and they're trying to find their own center. We want to, you know, university has to strive to create this safe middle ground, right? Where it is all right to be confused, it's all right not to take a stand. I remember when I was a graduate student and there was a Roe versus Wade that season, right? And my you know, I'm a sociologist, right? So all the sociology department, you know, my colleagues there were more liberal than I was. So my office mate came up to me one Friday and said, "Okay, tomorrow morning we're picking you up at like 5 a.m." And I go like, "For what?" And it goes, "Well, we're going to Washington because, you know, Charlottesville is like a couple of hours drive from DC. We're going to DC to protest." And I go, "Protest what?" And she's like, "Well, Roe versus Wade, what's wrong with you?" And I go, "Oh, you know, I have a problem. I have a moral dilemma because, you know, of my religious beliefs." And she was so angry with me because she said, "It's women like you who ride on the achievements of women like us." And I just went, "Yes, thank you very much." So I do think that, you know, when we talk about diversity and we talk about having, you know, a climate where we are inclusive, right, of different viewpoints, how do we then teach our young scholars that, you know, that mutual respect? You may not agree. I mean, you may feel that this is a moral issue and there is no gray, right? There's right or wrong. I think part of university education has to highlight that gray because we live in a world where what is morally right today may not be morally right 100 years from now, right? So it's that growing that humility, I feel, where you are confident enough of yourself and your beliefs, and you don't have to protect your identity through the views of others, and at the same time be able to respect very opposing viewpoints, while at the same time still be confident in what you stand for, right? I think when we are able to grow enough of such young leaders, then I'd say that I'm very optimistic for our future. It's the polarization that worries me.
Thank you, Prof. I think that's a good point, polarization. We have quite a lot of that in Hong Kong at the moment. So, and not to go into that point, I'm now going to turn the microphone to everyone in this fireside chat. It involves some technicality, so if I look a bit hesitant later, you have to bear with me. If you wish to speak when I call on to you, please raise your hand. I'll unmute your microphone. And when you're being invited, please could you introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and ask your question or make your comments or observation using no more than 5 sentences, and I will stop you if you don't. So let's see who's raising their hand. Who's there? Right. I see one hand, so let's see. Sadia?
Well, yes. I think it's good evening, or in my part of the country, it's going to be the nightfall now. I'm Dr. Sadia Shehzad from Pakistan. And I just want to know, I actually enjoyed the comments made by Pauline about the polarization and how universities should be doing they should be creating grounds where students, they can respect each other's diversity based upon their own cultural backgrounds and religions. This is something which it touched my heart. I just want to ask you, I think, Winnie, you are from Singapore, if I'm not wrong? I'm sorry, I just want to know what is being, what policies are being taken by the universities in Far East countries, where, or in the West, where students, international students are there from different religions, from different backgrounds. Do you think there is a culture of accepting them with respect and with humility, or is there some polarization going on, or the students become, they are sort of unsettled because of that unacceptable environment in between the students, non-harmony in between the students? I just want to know how you people deal with this kind of thing, or how do you give, what grounds you give your students to learn this thing? I may add one thing. I just want to add one thing, because I'm more interested to know about it, because my daughter is studying in Singapore right now. And I want to know how do you deal with it? Because in our country, when international students come, they are not, we don't get much of students from West. We do get from West, but they are again from Muslim background, and they come back to study medicine here. But in other universities, like my son is in Germany, my daughter is in Singapore right now. How do you give that ground to students from different backgrounds to actually respect each other and accept each other?
Thanks, Sadia. I'm going to deflect that question to Prof. Pauline. But at the same time, our colleagues in US, Australia, and the UK welcome a lot of students who are from the Asian background as well, and they have the policy and practices in place. So after Prof. Pauline, any speakers from the other 3 regions, please do jump in.
Well, Sadia, I hope your daughter is having a good time in Singapore. Is she doing okay?
Yes, she is doing okay in university. Outside the university campus, she had some problems with students where unacceptability was there, and she was quite upset although she is so well settled in the campus, in classes and everywhere, but she had problems from other students in outside the campus. So that is why I'm asking the question.
So I'm sorry to hear that, but in Singapore, we have absolutely zero tolerance for discrimination against religion and ethnicity, right? That's part of our creed, because Singapore is a multicultural society, and we have very important minority members, our Malay Muslim Singaporeans, and we have also a very strong group of Indian Singaporeans from different diverse, the mosaic of amazing Indian culture. So by and large, Singapore government has a very zero tolerance attitude towards anything that disturbs racial or religious harmony. So Singaporeans, by and large, we grow up in a culture where we respect and accept the different races. So I would be very flippant if I say that there is no discrimination, right? I'm mindful as a sociologist, international exposure is very important. Living in Singapore, I am a racial majority. So I always think that things are fine, everything is great. And then I go away and in the US, and then I suddenly realize that, oh my, the world through the lenses of an ethnic minority is quite different, right? So when I come home, then I'm a lot more sensitive, right? I realize that, I think it's equal, but then some, equal and not equal kind of, debate, right? So all I can say, Sadia, is that if your daughter ever feels threatened, she should report it to her university, and somebody there, maybe her dean of students, or if she's living in a hostel, the hall mistress or hall master will be able to take good care of her. I want to assure you that in Singapore, there is absolutely zero tolerance, right, for any kind of infraction against racial harmony and religious harmony. And we take it very seriously. I mean, we have, it's against the law. You can go to jail, right, if you do anything to disturb the peace on these grounds.
Okay. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you so much.
If I could just jump in on some of the bits of the conversation, I think in terms of about the importance with like inclusiveness on campus and things, is about how when we kind of bring different cultures, different backgrounds in one kind of pot in some way, which is basically what universities are, is about a mixture of being able to teaching and encouraging our students to kind of be open to kind of different cultures and different ways of life, and also but doing it with respect. So previously, when in previous roles that I've had, I think it's important. I learned that it's important to kind of respect that, for example, for some cultures, or it may not be within their culture, it may not be acceptable, for example, to be LGBT, for example, but it's about how we ensure that there is respect at the core. So just because it isn't something that you personally understand or is part of your frame of understanding, not frame of understanding, but frame of kind of like reference or all this kind of thing. I think respect really kind of stands at the core about kind of ensuring that all those different cultures, backgrounds, and like, when you go beyond faith and race, and when you're looking at sexuality and disability and gender, to make sure that that at the core is respect. And I think if you respect other people, even other people who are different, then I think then it can create really I can't say the word harmonious like institutions and campuses.
Thanks, Louise. I do have a question to Prof. Pauline in terms of the penalty. You said it is a crime and one would go to jail. How long would one go to jail?
It depends on
the longest sentence and the shortest?
I can't. I think it really depends on the intent.
Right. Okay. I shall Google it later.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move to another question. Charlene, the microphone is yours. Could you unmute? Yeah.
You can hear me. Hi, I'm Charlene Allen. I'm calling from the UK, so I'm in the same place as Louise. I had a comment and also a couple of questions, Winnie. So maybe you choose which one you want to put forward. But the comment really was about what Aaron was saying with regards to being conscious about messaging, and I think it's not just the messaging, but also the words that we're using around this topic. And I think about, is it tolerance or is it respect? Is it inclusiveness or is it equality? Because those words can be defined and received in very different ways, and so I think we do need to be mindful of that. So that was just kind of a comment really, but my questions were, the first one was something that Louise said, and it is everyone's responsibility. But how do we instill that sense of responsibility in higher education, in colleagues and in students? And the second question was really around technology. So COVID has required institutions to embrace a digital approach, and I think technology can support kind of being inclusive, not just on campus but more widely within education. And what are the panel's thoughts around that? And do they have any examples of good practices, as the title says, good practice around the use of technology with regards to inclusiveness on campus and education? That was it.
Thanks, Charlene. Any of our speakers want to jump in?
I think in terms of the technology, I think it's been interesting because there's so many things that institutions before were like, we can't do that. So for example, online learning and teaching, they were like, sorry, it was never a can't, but it was never a yes at the same time. So I think it's been fascinating for me to see how institutions have like really embraced technology to kind of make sure that the kind of teaching can continue, but I'm also on the flip side that for us to be really careful that we don't end up relying on technology as the sole source within our university. Because even though technology has kind of opened doors, but I don't think it's fully accessible for all students, especially when you're thinking about students with disabilities, that it'll close the door to a lot of students without us even realizing it. And obviously, because we haven't got the opportunity to be able to physically see students how we used to, that we probably won't catch those students that kind of like drop out or are kind of disengaged in our institutions. And so is that balance? I think it's open, it's really open doors, it's accelerated change, it's suddenly, you know, lectures are able to be projected to like hundreds of students, but it's about us not forgetting the core of what institutions are about. It is about the people, and otherwise everyone will be going to an open university, and not everyone does. So it's about remembering what us as an even beyond COVID, I think is remembering what is the value of like campuses, and what do they bring in terms of like belonging, sense of connection, human interaction, and just the inclusiveness that can't always be created on a digital platform.
If I may,
Aaron,
sorry, Aaron.
Yeah, Aaron and then Polly.
I just want to say, in terms of technology, what's interesting though, you've got to remember, students have been online and talking to each other online for a really long time. And so although all of a sudden there's this universities are freaking out because how they put their courses online, in terms of students interacting socially and culturally, that's been around for ages. I mean, I've created digital platforms, you know, in an international context where students have interacted. And I think it's really powerful because I think what happens is digital is a great leveler. And I think digital has done that for society as a whole. And I think we've made great progress in terms of diversity and inclusion because of digital. Digital is a double-edged sword, of course. There are a whole lot of arguments for all the bad things it does. But I do think it has brought people together and it has sort of dissolved a lot of barriers. And I see that in universities happening digitally for a long time. I saw international students who often would get to a campus and often would segregate. Online, that those barriers would break down, they'd get to talk to each other a little bit more, and they would sort of, they would realize that they had more in common than they would if they were sort of sitting at a class or somewhere physically where they tend not to interact as much. You can force them to come together and come to a physical event and they'll still sort of sit in their groups. But online, there's a natural sort of integration that happens. It is really powerful. And so a lot of that really great stuff is going to happen in the more social digital platforms rather than in terms of online class delivery. I don't think that'll have a huge effect. So I think that there's been a lot of great stuff happening digitally on campuses for a really long time, I have to say. Yeah.
Let me be the devil's advocate. So I take the stand that any communication is better than no communication, right? So we do see that you're right. Most of our students, are wired up, so they're way ahead of us. So as an educator, sometimes, what we need to do is, learn that for our students, this next generation, they are smack in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution, and therefore this is their mode of communication. How do we leverage this, right? And so that I'm with you on that, Aaron. However, COVID has highlighted the digital divide, right? We see inequalities that, it was so easy for us to miss when students are in campus and they walk around and they hang around libraries all the time. We don't think anything of it. We just assume that, they're hardworking and all that. But many of these students had to come to school and had to rely on the library because they did not have, right, a laptop that would have that speed, to enable them to follow the discussions, the lectures, and so forth. They may not have Wi-Fi at home, right? This was something that we learned. So until we can get to the point where every single child is brought on board, we have to be mindful that these gaps, the inequalities will just grow even more. Then, of course, there is my special needs babies, right? Those who are who may not be able to leverage technology. So like during finals, we are mindful that not all students could do online exams. So for our visually challenged students, they had to be, partnered with a student assistant to read out, right, the script to them and so forth. So we can't resist technology, right? We can't fight this new wave that many of us have now embraced, right? And because we can see the miracles of a digital world, but I think what we have to be mindful of are those who are left behind, and how to bring them with us as we move to the next age.
Thank you. I'm going to move the microphone to Mary Jane. She's been waiting very patiently. So Mary Jane, the mic is yours. Are you there?
Hello?
Hello, hi there, you're on.
I'm on. Can you hear me now? Am I? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good evening. Good evening here because I'm from the Philippines. I agree with Miss Pauline's statements, but with due respect to her, I beg to negate. There are two statements. She said, well, I don't know if I heard it right. It's all right not to take a stand.
Mary, you have a lot of echoing at your end, and I think
Hello?
Yeah, there is a lot of echoing, so I'm afraid I have to mute you now. So you try again. Yeah, I think we'll just have to mute you. Yeah, if you can type your question later on. I'm going to move on to another attendee who raised her hand for a long time too. Is Ladina? Ladina, you're on.
Hello, how are you? Yes.
Yes.
I wanted to make a contribution. The previous caller mentioned, about digitalization versus the inclusiveness. I wanted to mention that I didn't introduce myself, Dr. Mandi Teresa from South Africa. Okay, at our college, I'm at a college and currently I'm lecturing. And we lecture to disabled students as well. Like, for example, we've got the mainstream students versus the disabled students in one class. So this is what we do. I work with an interpreter. So we have been making online lessons after the introduction of COVID, after this pandemic. We have been having online lessons. I will teach as if they are students, then the interpreter will interpret through my slides for the benefit of the deaf students that I teach. And then I also have a WhatsApp group as a lecturer to keep all my students included. The reason why we have WhatsApp groups is I teach old students and young students in one class. So at the end of the day, what it means is the method that I use for old students and the method for the young students do not sort of merge. At the end of the day, what we do now is I create a flow where the elderly will also speak and the young students will also speak. So we try as much as possible to practice inclusiveness in terms of communication and also in terms of listening to their problems. That's my contribution.
Thank you. That's a good example of embracing equity. Do any of our speakers want to respond on that, or we just moved on? Because I think timing is on us. I'm not seeing any urgency, so I'm going to move on to the next stage, where actually this is going back to all the speakers. We have heard 3 questions so far. They're quite sort of substantial observation and contribution there. Can I please invite each speaker to make a final comment in about a minute? And if we can do it in a reverse order. So Aaron go first, then Louise, then Prof. Pauline, and then Karen. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Oh dear, on the spot I am. Hang on, am I muted? No, I'm okay. My final comment. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting for me, I suppose, because I talk coming from this country, from my perspective of higher education right now. In Australia, I think it's international higher education is in a very interesting place, and I don't know. I guess it's going to be different all over the world. So it's hard with a global audience to say something that resonates across all those boundaries. But I still believe in it, and I hope the world gets moving again, and that the universities can keep being a part of not just internationalization but diversity and inclusion in many very areas, and fly the flag again. And that's pretty much it. I don't know. I would say, yeah.
For me, in terms of, I'm going to be touching upon the questions / contribution from our last person from the audience about the importance of equality of access and equity. That is actually really important with all of this, and the importance of being able to, as much as possible, to be able to still be able to bring students on a kind of level playing field, even within this, what is looking like an ongoing digital, like online teaching and learning and everything in between space. And it was really great to hear about the kind of measures that you put in place to kind of make sure that all your students have the right access to their learning. And I think that is, even though we may not be able to physically be interacting with students, I think it's important that those things are still not forgotten about, and that everyone is able to still kind of excel excel within our institutions, disregarding any kind of barriers that society may have put on them. So yeah, just well done for the work that you're doing, and is about about the importance of equity in everything that we do.
Equity, access, and keep going. Prof. Pauline.
Well, I must speak now as Dean of Students, right? This generation is an amazing generation. I think that, they're very different from us. I resent it whenever they are called all kinds of names, all kinds of fruit names, right? The truth of the matter is this is an amazing generation, and they are facing challenges, right? Because for many of them, rising to their aspirations is challenging, because for my generation, it was easier for us to achieve social mobility because we started from a fairly low base. For this generation, it's so much harder. So, but they have the grit and gumption. I see that during COVID, right? When we kept, making decisions, shifting them online, offline, hybrid, no complaints at all, right? They just gamely, teach me forever, telling me, you're muted. You're muted. You gotta unmute if you want to lecture us, right? So they are an amazing generation, and I think they have their hearts in the right place. So the environment has never received as much attention. And if you see the drivers of change, many of them are youth leaders. So I think at universities, we are really blessed to be in a position to nurture and to influence this new generation of leaders. They are very aware of issues of inequality. They are aware of the importance of integration and inclusiveness. So it is up to us to walk with them and to partner them so that we can achieve, a more harmonious social arrangement, living arrangement for all of us. And thank you for having me today. I had so much fun.
Thank you very much, Prof. Pauline. Karen, last but not least.
Well, thanks to all of you. This has been a really fascinating conversation. I think what I would say in conclusion is that one thing when it comes to equity and issues of inequity, what COVID has really done is make those even more clear. It's really thrown things into relief. And so you see those students who have access to wonderful Wi-Fi and, quiet, rooms of their own in which to study. And then you see students who have had to, in the US, go in their cars and go to parking lots in order to access, restaurant parking lots, McDonald's parking lots in order to access Wi-Fi, or who have had to petition to stay on campus because that's the only way, as Pauline said, that's the only way they have access to Wi-Fi. They have no homes, some of them, to even go to. And so I think really COVID has magnified this, maybe even exacerbated it. On the other hand, to be optimistic, I talk to a lot of professors who say, it's really given me insight into my students' lives in a way that I did not have before. I see, when we're on Zoom, where they're studying from and what the challenges that they are facing. And so while I think we all want to talk about broad programming and interventions that universities as a whole institutionally can take, I think that there's some promise in that faculty, who obviously all care about their students, really have this heightened awareness. And I think you may see sort of different interventions kind of moving forward because of this understanding of their students' lives.
That's very encouraging. Thanks, Karen. I hope all of you have enjoyed today's Apply HE Fireside Chat. A lot to continue the conversations on. Before I say thank you and hello, please can I invite you to put your hands together? I know it's very hard, but if you can put your hands together for our incredible panel members, Ms. Karen Fisher, Prof. Pauline Strahan, Ms. Louise with Mr. Aaron Dark, the Apply HE team, Mandy, Simon, and Peter, and all of you from all corners of the world. See you next month. Mandy, back to you.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for the very insightful discussion and comments. I have learned a lot and I hope that the same is true for you. For now, I'd like to express my deep appreciation to our wonderful speakers for their time and contribution, and also thank you, our participants, joining us for the Applied AG Fireside Chat. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Universitas Hasanuddin, also known as UNHAS from Indonesia, their valuable support, and our co-host, Education Insight. Well, this marks the end of this particular webinar. We have many more events planned. On the 16th of September at 9 p.m. Singapore time, we will be hosting session 4 of the Fireside Chat series. The topic of session 4 is supporting men in taking up family duties. Mrs. Winnie Ely, partner of Education Insight from the UK, is our moderator again, and we have 4 very distinguished speakers. They are Professor Nigel Healy. He's the Professor of International Higher Education and Associate Vice President of Global Engagement at the University of Limerick in Ireland. Associate Professor Sally Hayward, Assistant Dean of International for Undergraduate at the University of Newcastle in Australia. And Professor Budi, Dean of the Faculty of Medicine at Hasanuddin University in Indonesia. And last but not least, Mr. Chikodi, Director of Programs and Partnerships at the British Council in Ghana. The Fireside Chat is held once a month on every third Wednesday of the month at 1 p.m. GMT or 9 p.m. Singapore time, so be sure to mark the date and time in your diary for the next Fireside Chat. That's 16th of September. This slide shows you the future dates for our series of Fireside Chat, and it will go on to the end of the year. Registration will soon open for session 4, which is, as mentioned, scheduled on the 16th of September, so please look out for our emailers. Aside from the Fireside Chat, we also have the Squaring the Circle debate, which is a monthly webinar held on every first Wednesday of the month. Led by our legendary debate master, Dr. Kevin Downing from the City University of Hong Kong, Squaring the Circle debate forces our debaters to take side on a current and often controversial issue. Designed to keep you informed, open-minded, and entertained with plenty of audience participation, the SCD is not to be missed. The next SCD will take place on 2nd of September with the motion, Higher Education Collaboration Can Heal Geopolitical Divides. Our passionate proposers are Dr. Janet Oliver, Director and Founder of Education Insight from the UK, Professor Perry Hobson, Pro Vice Chancellor for Engagement at the Sunway University, Malaysia, and our also proposers are Ms. Dian Ekawati. She's Head of Global Engagement from the Universitas Airlangga, Indonesia, and Professor Sandip Gopalan, Vice Chancellor from the Piedmont International University from the UK. So don't miss the next SCD on the 2nd of September at 1 p.m. GMT, which is 9 p.m. in Singapore. As mentioned, Squaring the Circle debate is always on the first Wednesday of every month to the end of the year, and the next one, episode 3, is on 2nd of September with the motion, Higher Education Collaboration Can Heal Geopolitical Divides. So in a nutshell, what it means is we have a webinar every other Wednesday all the way to December. And we are very honored that you are spending your Wednesdays with us, be it morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you.
Welcome. The first of its kind, I don't think there's ever been such a diversified event where we have 3 higher education consortia coming together from 3 different parts of the world, Asia, North America, and Europe. Applied AG Exchange Higher Education Consortia is scheduled for the 9th of September. This event will focus on the role of higher education consortia during a pandemic. So if you're involved or interested in consortia, be sure to attend this very special edition. Our speakers are none other than the leaders of the respective consortia itself. We have Professor Ponchai Monkovanit, President of the Asia Cooperation Dialogue University Network Consortium, Professor Marek Kotlivski, he's the President of the Compostela Group of Universities, and Mr. Sean Manley Castellan, Executive Director of CONAHAC, Consortium for North American Education Collaboration. Our guest speaker is Professor Moritz van Rooyen, Rector at the University of Applied Sciences Europe, or UE as they're known. and moderating the event is Professor Judith Lamy, Managing Director at JL Education Consultants from the UK. Applied HE Exchange Higher Education Consortium will take place on Monday, 9th of September at 1 p.m. GMT time, and that's 9 p.m. in Singapore. And we have one more special webinar before the year is up, and this is excluding all the SCBs and Fireside chats. If you want to learn more about the innovations taking place in skills-based education, join our inaugural Applied HE Exchange Professional Higher Education on the 22nd and 23rd of September at our usual time slot of 1 p.m. GMT or 9 p.m. Singapore time. This special two-part webinar will address the question of the digitization of skills-based education from a policy and a practitioner perspective. Speakers who have already accepted our invitation include Dr. Janika Jayalath of the Tertiary and Vocational Education Commission from Sri Lanka, Professor Syamar Majumdar of UNESCO Univ Germany, Professor Raha Abdul Rahim of University Technical Malaysia, or UTEN as they're known, Dr. Conrad Inigo Jr. of Papacoa in the Philippines, and Ms. Grace Titi from the Ramogi Institute of Advanced Technology from Kenya. The moderator is once again our very charming Mrs. Ely. And so for the month of September, we actually have a webinar every week. But do not worry if you can't remember all the dates. We will be sending you our weekly web emailers, or you can visit our website, appliedhe.com. In the meantime, do check out our Applied HE Extra News website, where you can submit your institution's news and press releases weekly. A piece of good news to share if you have not heard about it yet. We are pleased to announce that Applied HE Extra News is now indexed by Google News. This means our readership is growing rapidly, and we can now truly promote you on the global stage and at no charge at all. This is great news for both readers and institutions which publish news via the Applied HE online news platform. So for readers, it will enable them to receive all the latest news from their favorite news sources in one place. And for institutions that submit news, your stories will reach a much wider audience. Google News is often used by professionals, researchers, and decision makers to monitor or find news about specific topics and institutions. Therefore, by submitting news stories to Applied HE Extra, institutions are guaranteed to reach those targeted audience. So please send us your extraordinary news now. Also take a look at our Applied HE Job Ready rating. The new rating system emphasizes teaching and learning, graduate skills, employability, and interaction with industry. The rating is also non-prescriptive and can be applied to different types of institutions across different sectors, from full-fledged research universities to specialized institutions. So please drop us a line if you would like to learn more about the Job Ready ratings and how it can translate into affordable strategies for global branding and marketing. You can also find some preliminary rating results on our website. And finally, we invite you to submit information about your institution's online degree programs, as we plan to soon launch Applied HE Online Ready, an authoritative information portal about high-quality online degrees around the world. This will enable you to promote your online degree courses in any language and on the global stage, again at no charge. So please send information of your online course degrees to Peter Stack at ps@appliedhe.com. And this is something new. We are also working on another new project called the Applied HE EMI Ready Rating. This is a great tool to evaluate an institution's English medium of instruction readiness. Many universities around the world now offer programs in English, but the level and completeness of English language instruction varies greatly, especially for universities from non-English speaking countries which offer English language degree programs. The Applied HE EMI Ready Rating can be a useful internal benchmarking tool and a great marketing tool to recruit international students. If the EMI Ready Rating is something that interests you, please write to Peter Stack again at ps@appliedhe.com. And last but not least, as you know, we are the new kid on the block and very grateful for all the support that we can get. which is why I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge once again all our very supportive webinar partners. City University of Hong Kong, Education Insight UK, Universitas Erlangga from Indonesia, Universitas Hasanuddin also from Indonesia, the University of Lahore from Pakistan, China Cultural University from Taiwan, Changchun Christian University also from Taiwan, and Pearl Academy from India. A big thank you for the valuable support given to Applied HE. All right, thanks very much, everyone. However, the evening is not over yet, so please do not leave the chat room. We want you to experience a networking atmosphere that is as creative and as close as we can get to a physical networking environment. So as per our usual tradition, we're going to open the room now so that we can all take a Wi-Fi together. You can also chat with one another with the chat function, or even introduce yourself to the entire audience, as we will unmute you during the Wi-Fi. Just use your imagination and pretend you're the room and pretend you're in the room together. So please be sure to turn on your cameras, to play some music, have a drink, relax, the room is all yours. Of course, you're free to leave whenever you want, but we hope you will stay to e-meet all your friends. I shall now hand you over to Peter, who will organize the Wi-Fi. Over to you, Peter.
Hi, Mandy. Yes. Okay, we're out. Yeah, now I can turn on the music. We have some light music. All right. Yeah. Thank you very much for everybody for being brave tonight and joining us on camera. It is wonderful to see all of you. Yeah, we will take a few VCs also via YouTube later on, so not to worry. Thank you very much to the speakers and people from everywhere. Do some of the attendees want to just say hi and say where they're coming from? Don't be shy, just unmute. Hi, Mary Jane. What happened to your sound? We missed you. I think you're one of our regulars, right?
I really don't know what happened.
Oh.
Can I be heard now? Echo.
Now you're loud and clear. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, it's very unlucky.
Yes, there's a voodoo there.
Next time.
Next time, yes. Oh, yes. And Professor Boodoo, I think, is a future debater. He's wearing a mask. He wants to remain anonymous and very healthy and safe for the time being, which is good. Aaron has a cat. What's your cat's name? You're muted, Aaron, so we can't hear.
I am in a hospital, so.
Oh, Prof. Boodoo is in the hospital. Oh, he's wearing the whole mask. Very good, Professor Boodoo.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I have self-image and very
wow.
tight.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm sorry.
So Professor Boodoo is from University of Hasanuddin in Sulawesi in Indonesia, and he's still on the job. So wonderful.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to introduce or say hi? So Aaron, what's your cat's name? Sile. Okay. I see. Ah, very famous cat now.
May I take a Wi-Fi, Peter?
Yeah. We will, or we can. We can take it later. We record everything, so it's fine. Don't worry. All right.
Yes.
Yeah, we've taken some. So yes, cheers. Or this is just a cup of tea. Very boring. Anybody else want to say something? Where are you coming from? Blandina, thank you very much for joining us all the way from South Africa.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to having been part of this. Did we take the photo already?
Yeah, we did, and we have Photoshop, so you'll all be smiling, and it's very good. So don't worry.
I love photos.
And how it translates into affordable strategies.
Mandy is talking in the background somewhere, but that's all right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us also for this very brief social mixer. It was wonderful to see your faces, even if we couldn't hear all of your voices. And yeah, we hope to have you back next time for the full program. Yes, so thank you very much. Good night, good morning, good evening, whatever it is. Sleep well, work hard.
Bye-bye.
Home safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Okay, I'm going to leave now.
Yeah, bye-bye.